It's incredible. And we've never seen a player who was exclusively a DH win the MVP. Ohtani doesn't count because he was pitching the 2 years he won.
It's the Inside Scoop with FT Senior Insider Ken Rosenthal coming off of Fair Territory, which I advise everyone to check out. They went over some of what we went over at the top of the show, teams that are rebounding like the Astros, the Mets, etc. One team I want to lock in on that we haven't covered enough this week, Ken, is the Chicago Cubs. This is becoming an epic disaster right now. They are 37-44. I know they don't want to sell and they're going to do whatever it takes, but they're putting themselves in a really bad position right now. What are your thoughts on this team?
Agreed. And one thing that stands out with them, 19 one-run losses, most in Major League Baseball. Their offense has been mostly the culprit of all this. They're 20th in runs per game, 28th batting average with runners in scoring position. Only two teams are worse than them. So they have some bullpen injuries. Merriweather and Leiter Jr. and Alzolay. All of that is contributing to this, but it's kind of a team-wide thing right now. Their rotation's okay, but the bullpen's been a problem. The offense has been a problem. And when you have two areas like that are so deficient, you have to wonder where this is going. Now, I know you guys talked about turnaround teams earlier. Houston, St. Louis, Boston, the Mets. I wrote about the Blue Jays today. They want to be one of those teams. I'm sure the Cubs want to be one of those teams. It's too early to write anyone off. It was too early a month ago. It's too early right now because of the expanded playoffs and so quickly things can change in this sport. But the Cubs, no question, have been a huge disappointment.
All right, before we get to individual players or parts of the team, is this showing that this team was poorly constructed? And I say that because Craig Counsell was brought in with his $8 million contract for 5 years because he did a good job of getting the most out of what other people in the industry didn't think was there. So is this a direct reflection that they don't have any depth and that the organization set him and the rest of the players up for failure unless everything goes perfectly to plan?
I'm not ready to say that yet, Eric. And certainly catching has been a problem for them. They're not getting offense out of that position at all. Released Yan Gomes. Amaya's still there. Dansby Swanson and Nico Horner offensively have both underperformed. That's not poor roster construction. That's players not performing to their capabilities. And I mentioned the bullpen injuries. That's part of this too. So I'm not ready to bury them yet. Not really ready to bury anyone yet. But at the same time, these flaws are now apparent. And it's interesting with them. They don't necessarily act like a big market team. I know they signed Bellinger, but only because his market was distressed. They are a team that kind of runs on a budget. And I mentioned this in Fair Territory. Well, all teams run on a budget, obviously. But what I said was that there's only so much you can hold Jed Hoyer responsible or Craig Counsell responsible when the team is operating with certain limitations. And that has to be said here, too. That's part of this.
Okay, so you're talking Cubs here, and we all know how I feel about the Cubs, so they're not turning it around. Which team is more likely to turn around, even though I just said that? That's a personal thing, but you're the expert. The Blue Jays, we've seen the Astros get back to 500. They would have been on the list. Or the Cubs. Which team is more likely to turn it around and have an actual shot at the playoffs?
Right now, I can't say I'd support either in that regard.
You have to pick one, Ken. You can't just not say an answer, okay?
Relax, AJ. I'm going to pick one. Just relax. The Blue Jays have a history of not being a team that performs to its potential. Goes back to last year, even before that. They haven't won a playoff game in a long time. The Cubs, in my view, have an ideal manager. He is a really good manager, and they have ability that is untapped, in my opinion. As I mentioned, Swanson and Horner. You could say the same with the Blue Jays, Bichette and all that, but I just feel that there's more of a chance the Cubs do this than the Blue Jays do. I do not like the Blue Jays where they've been for the last couple of years. To me, it's a disappointing team, a team that needs to change some things up, and I don't see it turning around. Watch, they'll win 10 straight, but if I have to pick an answer, AJ, I'll pick the Cubs.
Okay, well,
Tommy in the chat wants to know why Ken hates the Blue Jays so much and why you hate the city of Toronto. So can you expand on that for us, please?
I hate. Yeah, I will. I hate all 30 teams, and whenever I write
No, that's
negatively
not what he
about
said.
one
He just
team,
said the Blue Jays, Toronto, and everyone that's Canadian or has any Canadian.
That means he read The Athletic this morning.
Yep.
I have a hard time believing that actually was asked in that fashion. I don't. There's nothing I have against Toronto, for goodness sake. It's one of the great cities on earth. And as for the Blue Jays, I don't hate any team. But when a team underperforms, guess what? I might write about that. That's what kind of guys like me do. So the Blue Jays have underperformed. And when teams underperform, don't play to their potential, guys like me are going to write that once in a while. Life.
Ken hates Terrence and Phillip too. Let's throw that in there too.
You hate who?
He hates Terrence and Phillip on South Park too.
I don't hate anybody.
Anyway, let's say both of these teams continue in the direction that they're continuing. Who's going to be more advantageous in making the moves? Because both of these teams, Javier Assad just went on the IL, so that's a huge blow for the Cubs. Both of these teams have unbelievable rotation pieces in a league that need rotation pieces. Who's going to be the most advantageous and make that move that might not look great for this year, but is going to bring back the haul that all fans want for the next 3 years?
In my move, the Blue Jays should be that team. And I mean, my opinion, I should say. And the reason I say that is because of the way their roster is set up right now, their payroll. So Bichette and Guerrero both signed through next season. They haven't signed them to extensions yet. I don't believe they're going to sign them to extensions. There's no reason to think that that is going to happen. So you have those two pieces right there that you need to make a call on. And the way I wrote it today, Eric, is that if you trade one or two of those guys, those are prime pieces, then why not look at trading a Bassett or a Gossman? Those are guys making some money. They have control beyond this year. I can see that more than I can see the Cubs trading Justin Steele, right? Who's a younger guy who've got for a few more years. So in my opinion, the Blue Jays, if they do not turn this around, need to look at anything and everything. Their product the last 2 years has been kind of uninspired, to say the least. And that's the team that needs to act, in my opinion, more so than the Cubs.
Ken, do you think there would be an uproar? And I mean, should the organization care? I know, fans north of the border are pissed about a raise in ticket prices, although, ticket prices are always dynamic. They'll lower them if they need to, usually teams, otherwise people won't go to games. But also, they spent on a lot of things, renovations to spring training park. And I know you wrote about some of this in The Athletic. So I asked this because if they do start to unravel pieces that aren't just the free agents coming up, like you say, Kikuchi and Yimi Garcia, it's going to hurt attendance for next year too. And it's going to point them in a direction towards a rebuild, whether they like it or not. And even if it takes only a couple years.
Well, Scott, you kind of summed up exactly the predicament that they're in. It's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't thing. You're damned if you do because of what you just said. Attendance is already down 4,000 per game from last year. It's going to go down further if you start trading off your veteran parts. At the same time, if you don't do that, you might be headed for a problem down the line. Now, the other part of this in the background is the contractual situations of team president Mark Shapiro, who has one more year after this, and general manager Russ Atkins, who has 2 years. Now, their ownership, the Jays ownership, Rogers Communications, might be the most detached ownership of any in the game. I don't know that they're ever paying attention. So maybe those guys are safe and they're good. But at the same time, if you start to take this apart, then the question becomes, well, why are we doing this? We failed. Why have we failed? That comes back to the team president and the general manager. So all of these factors are kind of swirling around the Blue Jays right now, and it's a complicated discussion. Even if you start trading players, what are you going for? Are you going for prospects with the most upside who might be further down the line, or are you looking for a quick retool, guys who are major league ready and can help you in the short term? That's a decision that would have to be made as well.
Yeah, and the Blue Jays might turn into last year's Mets. Record payroll, pieces to sell, and they become the belle of the ball, a term I know you like to use unfair territory sometimes when we get to the trade deadline. So let's talk Mets for a sec here. Armand with a question, and we can kind of broaden it, but he said, What relievers does Ken see the Mets looking at the deadline? Would they look at adding a bench bat, like a fourth outfielder or a utility player? I just would also like to point out how much the questions have changed about the Mets over about a week and a half span here. And we talked about them earlier, Ken. Could they add? My prediction was if they do add, it's maybe a longer term starting pitcher that they can have for multiple years of control. So if it's going to hurt, it's at least somebody that they can carry for next year when they think they're really going to be a World Series contender.
That's a good call, Scott, because a number of their starting pitchers are free agents or have options of some kind and might not be back next year. So if the Mets do buy, I would expect that would be what they seek. Controllable pieces. All teams want controllable pieces, right? At the same time, they've gone on this 15-4 run, and we'll see if it continues and sustains itself. But they've talked from the start of spring training about being a playoff team. David Stern said he thought this was a playoff team. Steve Cohen has made it clear he wants to win. So I would expect that if they are right there, that they're going to be aggressive. And you can't rule out potential free agents in that scenario. In fact, potential free agents will cost you less in prospect capital than a controllable piece would. And maybe that's their preference. They've been pretty adamant about keeping their prospects and building their system up. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they play over the next month, to see if they sustain this, and then to see how they act. And keep in mind too, and I'm going to repeat myself over and over again for the next month, there's nothing that says they can't do both at once. Maybe you trade Luis Severino to take advantage of the shortage in the starting pitching market to get a big return for him. And then maybe you supplement with a bench bat and a bullpen piece and maybe even get another starter in some other fashion. It's a buy-sell kind of thing. And again, I'll repeat myself once more. This doesn't have to be an either or. You can do both. And I expect in this market, teams will do both because of the shortage of talented players available.
Is this the worst thing that could have happened to the Red Sox? They're such an exciting team, and they're trying to claw back into it, and they're clawing back into it in a year where, in my opinion, they didn't spend enough. They could have had a much better team. Is this worst case scenario? Because now it's like hopes up. Oh, here we go. Now, but we're never going to touch our prospects because they're fun to watch. Are they going to do anything, or should they do anything?
Winning is never a worst case scenario. I'm sorry. There's no way that that's a bad thing. And yes, the Red Sox didn't expect to be in this position. They didn't try to be in this position, but they're there. And at some point, as Alex Cora said yesterday, talking to the press, hey, we got to get greedy. Not just think about the wild card. We got to think about the division. And that's the way they should be thinking. Now, that's the way Alex Cora is thinking. I'm not so sure the owners are thinking the same way, but no, this is a good scenario. This is a team that is on the rise and a team that should be active at the deadline because we've seen in the past couple of years, and Cora mentioned this too yesterday, when they kind of sit on the fence and don't do anything one way or the other in a major consequence kind of situation, kind of way, well, that's nowhere. So you got to be one or the other, in my opinion. You've got to be at least trying to get better. And they really haven't done that. They made a good trade a couple of years ago, one that we all ripped. Or I should say I ripped. I can't speak for everyone. The Christian Vasquez trade got them Abreu and Valdez. That's a great trade. Kyle Bloom gets the credit for that one. They need to be active, supplementing this team and trying to be the team that they should be, which is a large market behemoth.
Let's finish with Shohei Ohtani because he's on a heater. I feel like we're not talking about him enough, Ken. And I can spin it back to, I believe it was Monday's Fair Territory when you addressed his MVP chances. He certainly hasn't hurt his chances since you had that show. So when you're evaluating what's going on, what's your update on Ohtani? I know we've talked about this, a couple times, but I feel like it's still worth bringing up. He's been incredible at the plate.
Scott, what's amazing to me is that at times fans will reach out to me and say, oh, enough Ohtani. We don't want to hear. No, sorry. He's the best player in the game right now. He's the best player some of us have ever seen. He does things no one else can do, even when he's not pitching. And you look at him right now on this 10 RBI or 10-game RBI streak and leading the majors in OPS, doing all of the things he's doing out of the leadoff spot now because Mookie is out. It's incredible. And we've never seen a player who was exclusively a DH win the MVP. Ohtani doesn't count because he was pitching the 2 years he won. Is it possible? Sure, it's possible. It's possible he puts himself out there so much in the National League that it's just, there's no other choice. That said, he is a DH, and that part of the game that is not there, the defensive part, it does diminish his value. Again, if offensively he can separate himself to the extent that that kind of is mitigated, that would be a reason why he could be the first.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't like to do it, not that I have a real vote, but it also has to do with the competition. Is there somebody that can really put up with him? I mean, Mookie Betts looked like that guy, but now he's missing a lot of time. So it'll be a good one. We'll get our guys to weigh in on it at some point too. Ken, thanks for the time and the great day on Fair Territory as well. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Fair Territory was on right before Foul Territory on the FT YouTube channel. So if you want to check it out after this show, go for it. Right now for the dudes, we got a new little partnership running with Manscaped. You know how scary it can get when you're going for that close shave below the belt. So they've got you hooked up for those sensitive areas. Their newest package is the Performance Package 5.0 Ultra, including the star of the show, the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra. Also recommend you flipping back to yesterday's show if you want to see the products like Vanna White style from Top Father. I just emptied out the entire bag and he was showing each one off. He even turned the razors on. It was great. It got a little worrisome when he turned the razors on. I was concerned for myself. I backed up a little bit. Thought he was going to try to trim my nose hairs, but we're good. Anyway, the 5th generation trimmer features 2 interchangeable next-gen skin-safe blade heads. A standard one for taking a little off the top. Then you've got the new foil blade to go smooth wherever your heart desires. And also has the dual LED spotlights to provide contrast on multiple skin tones, 3 length setting combs, and perhaps best of all, it is waterproof. Beach, lake, shower, whatever. The razor will get the job done. And they threw in 2 free gifts to their Performance Package 5.0. The one we're talking about has boxers. It has a shed travel bag and a new buff bundle, which includes their signature silicone scrubber and their body wash. So no loofah action. Okay. Join the 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with our exclusive offer. It's 20% off plus free shipping when you go to manscaped.com and use promo code FOUL20, FOUL20. It's summertime and the trimming is easy. I was doing the podcast version of this and apparently noticed that I've been saying 20 a lot. So I'm working on my 20. I was saying 20 a lot.
Now.
20.
How now, brown cow?
Hey everybody, be sure to like and subscribe for more content.
We're back here every weekday, all year long, so do not miss an episode.
The videos are coming in all day. Here's another video you might enjoy.
Baseball the way it should be covered.